Alright.
Okay.
I reckon we start.
Alright, hold on.
Alright, well thanks for coming everyone, partially because you have to, but this is my presentation. IKM Professional Practice Folio presentation, is the title. You can see RMIT was nice enough to put me on their homepage for this, so I think we'll get straight into it. First of all, just a bit of background about why I chose this course. This is a photo from Black Saturday, and obviously for everyone that was there, it was a pretty horrific day. One of the things I heard during that was that there were quite a few people that died going back to crappy little, not crappy possessions, but possessions like photos and things like that. And I just thought, man, like, in this day and age of digitisation and things like that, I just couldn't believe like that would happen, or that's the reason for losing your life. So that was kind of the catalyst to start to get me interested in this area. And about 12 months later, in January 2010, actually enrolled in the subject. Obviously, like, the first thing I did was take the records course here, and then got into the placement. The first placement that I did was for Kodak, working in their archive. For Melbourne Museum, working in their archive. When Kodak closed in Australia, Melbourne Museum was invited to go through all the stuff and pick up what they wanted. So they got a whole heap of like chemical processing things and interesting artefacts, as well as like just boxes and boxes and boxes of their corporate archive. And so that has been sitting at Melbourne Museum for about 2 years before like we kind of got there. So part of that placement was getting in there and like working with the archive as well as digitising. So this is a screenshot of a bit of work that we did. It's on the Museum Victoria website. The next placement that I did was at Darabin Records and Archives Department, and got involved in a project which Terry Lynn also worked on a bit later on with all the councils, looking at re-tendering all their scanning services and back scanning and storage and things like that, again in the records area. And this is a screenshot from like the blackboards that we took in terms of when that was all brainstorming, and then a copy of the tender document that went out in January this year, or February. The third placement I then went and did was in visual image and copyright, again looking for the theme of this records and like kind of an archive, at this time a digital archive. And this is a screenshot just before the Goldest Pharaoh, or whatever it's called, came out, and this is on their internet. They were going to rename Pharaoh to Pharaoh Lap, just for the remainder of the year, so information. But it's still a bit funny in there. So that's like my placement, but along the way other things that kind of happened or got to do, involved in social media, so appeared in an interview on like RMIT media channel. And again, I feel like a lot of my course has been in reflection mode, and so that's an example after the first semester of where might have been after the first year of actually going through that kind of reflection process, which is kind of a bit weird to go and look at. But that was kind of part of the learning experience. Also did a bit of work at local primary school. This is their library crash, but while we're there, got to sit in on some other stuff, and this is their Stephanie Alexander exhibition. I just thought this is like awesome to feel her approach to cutting onions. So that was a bit of that was cool. And of course, the other thing that I reckon we've done a lot of in this course is play with software. So these are just a few examples of new, not all new, but tools and bits and pieces that played with along the way. So I guess in terms of the presentation, the key questions to ask, so how does this degree compare to other degrees? So I've done another degree here at RMIT in marketing, and so I thought I'd just have a bit of a look at that, as opposed to all the other degrees. This is a screenshot I took this morning just of like the marketing, if you were to do that course today, what you would actually study. And so you can see like there's core subjects like what you do, as well as a lot of marketing ones, but you see the marketing is like sales, strategic, business to business, global marketing, things like that. And there were no, like what staggered me actually having a relook at it is there's no like compulsory online. And I know when I did it, like I did marketing, started in '96, online was just coming in. And I was just staggered that you could do a degree in this day and age in marketing and not have that kind of stuff. And I guess in comparison to what we've just been through, I don't think that's the same criticism with terms of like the flavour and the technology influence in terms of what we've been studying. So I think that's pretty good. In terms of signature strengths of the degree, I reckon the thing is just off the top of my head were methodical way of referencing, having to read widely, opportunity to innovate within the course in terms of approach, lots of librarian tracks. A disdain for other disciplines. I think like when I did marketing, it was definitely accounting that copped it. I reckon a little bit more is from this is like marketing that copped it. And I think that's just a bit of a mistake or not understanding completely about what another discipline does. Increased appreciation for the invisible. Like a lot of the information management work is actually like you don't actually see it. But when you look at stuff, or I'm finding I can look at things in a different way now, and be able to see that like work in terms of information or how that actually some work that's gone in behind the scenes. And of course, like learning building blocks that can take a bit further down the track. In terms of the overall reflection, something that I've wrestled with is like this openness and transparency. I reckon in the marketplace, a massive thing towards openness, or in a couple of my placements in government have been in state and local levels in terms of this openness and looking at records and how can we provide greater access. I kind of wrestle with that as opposed to like then you've actually got a responsibility about that. So that's something I haven't completely resolved in my own thinking, other than I've kind of found it interesting on the way through. Another thing I reckon is, in terms of overall reflection, is this course, and I know it's because of its heritage, it's like taught from this perspective in terms of library and books, or you want a career path in terms of library, whereas I think it's maybe undertaught a little bit, whereas in actual fact that this is the information environment that we're in, and like WikiLeaks was very topical for a couple of semesters while we were studying, and it just kind of always in the back of my mind thinking through how, like if I was an information manager and someone had copied all our content and put it on the web or on WikiLeaks, how you actually manage your way through that. The other thing, just quickly, and I've got a couple more slides to go, is I reckon that this course has had a lot of it is from the approach that the content exists, whereas I think there's an opportunity. I know there was an elective on electronic publishing, and in the postgrad level there is, in terms of actually focusing on the content creator, that in your career you're going to create a lot of this content as well. So especially for a young guy like this, I reckon that's something that I thought was a little bit missing in terms of the course. The other thing I thought, and I'm just going for it as part of the presentation, is I found that there was a lot of opinions given in the course, or opinions were held up as fact from the academics as well. And I think that's kind of, compared to other courses in the area, not as much of a focus on an information science or approach that other universities have. With that said, like as I've said, in terms of the strength, we've learned a lot of it the way through it. Quickly, learning leads. The first couple of quick stories just to finish with. I volunteered at RMIT Open Day and with another lady who was studying here doing an MBA. And she manages a migration information centre. And one of the things we're talking about is the tool Google Translate, and how in classes, especially with the international students, typically the word output's a bit less. So kind of experimented on the way through in this degree about getting them to write in their native tongue and then pop it through Google Translate, and as a result you were copy editing a much larger output. And she was able to actually go and use that in her migration resource centre that she does, and so I thought that was kind of cool, that actually finding practical uses for the technology. Learning lead too, and this was kind of my other goal coming back to the Black Saturday, imagine if my house burnt down, what would actually happen. This is a screenshot or a photo from 2010 of my shed. And as you can see, all these boxes are full of documents, some of them in files, who knows. And that was kind of my goal, to slowly backspin this and work my way through. And as you can see, here's a recent shot, is the boxes have moved, slightly different setup, there's still crap everywhere. And I guess the learning lead is it's a lot more involved than you first thought. It sounds simple that, oh yeah, we could just get rid of all that stuff. It's not necessarily the case. Finally, there's a link to my Folio. You can kind of copy these slides on there, and just to kind of see the work in progress as I'm kind of going through it. Thanks for listening. Are there any questions? Marcus actually, I put this photo up to show Marcus. Marcus actually knew where it was. So.
Is that you on the bike?
Yeah.
Is that you in the country?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Is it like near Nelson, or is it where is it?
Just between Yane and Mansfield. So we did, one of the things I did during the course was a fundraising bike ride. So I raised a couple of thousand Ks around Victoria, and I think we raised about $25,000.
Wow, it does look really good.
Right?
It does look really good.
It's beautiful. Yeah, beautiful.
It's a long way up that hill.
Any questions?
Do you think that, I know you said that you've done a couple of other degrees past.
Yes.
Are you sort of now at the point where you think you don't need to go any further with your education and need to start really concentrating on your career? Or do you want to keep it?
Yeah, honestly, I reckon I'll squeeze one more thing in, and what I started the course at full time and kind of headed it back towards part time because I think for me that's more sustainable. So I kind of just continue to study for a little bit longer. I think with the information knowledge management, the more you kind of know about it, the more you realise you don't know.
Yeah.
And so there's still some things that I'd like to tidy up. I think one of the areas that I've found most interesting is kind of open my eyes towards the research side. I know Peter McCauley's taught extensively, and also like in this subject as well, we've touched on that. So I've kind of, there's a bit of work around that I'm still interested in, at least exploring, to maybe not close the door out completely. I've actually found it took about, I reckon, 12 months to reintegrate with academic kind of writing for me. So I kind of, while I've done that work, can I get anything else done while I'm there? So, yeah.
I know this is not your first course.
Yep.
After gaining this degree, where can you see yourself heading in a career in the future?
Yep. I think when I did my first course, it was just about getting a job. I think this one, I'm kind of starting to look at what kind of business you might be able to build in the area. Not necessarily consulting, but something about, as the previous slide, like some sort of personal information management in personal archives or something like that, because I see how horrendous. It's a big job, and just to be able to actually think through that and get some experience, that's kind of where I'm leaning. But kind of the project, like I work project-based basically, so I've got enough work that you can kind of build something like this on the side. So,
you mentioned in your presentation, Cameron, that you were more or less in reflection mode from the beginning of the course. And doing the portfolio this semester, has that helped you? Do you think that you had that opportunity to reflect on those reflections?
Yes, but not completely in the fact that I can't find them all.
Okay, yes.
So there's other stuff out there, but in terms of actually, I think what this has done is given a framework to actually go, well, hey, over time I can actually grow out of, I don't know if it's grow out of, I'll move through that in terms of doing the meta reflection and the reflexive behaviour. So I think it's still got some more work to do in terms of this subject and time frame. I'm not sure how thorough I'll be in that, but at least it's kind of, it's got a pathway to try and take, which is something that I didn't kind of have before. So yeah, thankful for that.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Okay, hold on.